You'd never guess that two 20-something stoners were among the largest arms dealers in the world, and they won the $300 million contract to supply the Afghan National Army. How? Simply through their laptops and cell phones, by Googling where to buy guns and explosives and then transferring them to the American military. David Packouz and Efraim Diveroli posed as merchants of death. But wait, that's not even scratching the surface. They were pretty much running an elaborate scam which the Pentagon fell for. Their story is as exciting, if not more interesting, than the movie based on their life, War Dogs. It includes everything from making money from conflict, doing time in prison, and being entangled in lawsuits. Did we not mention that one of them had musical interests as well? They're a surprising bunch, these two. Stay tuned to find out how these two Jewish boys scammed the Pentagon for $300 million. 2 years after the conflict in Afghanistan grew more violent, the New York Times published a story in 2008 about a small Miami-based business that had emerged as the Afghan army's primary source of weapons. Diveroli and Packouz, two executives in their early 20s, ran AEY Incorporated, and it was awarded a federal contract worth $300 million. The backstories of David Packouz and Efraim Diveroli, played in War Dogs by Miles Teller and Jonah Hill, are remarkably accurate. Before running into his old high school acquaintance again, Packouz worked as a massage therapist. Diveroli was sent to Los Angeles midway through his senior year of high school, where he learned the ropes of arms trade by selling guns with his uncle, before teaming up with Packouz to expand their business. But where did it all start? The biggest Orthodox synagogue in Miami Beach, Beth Israel Congregation, is where Packouz and Diveroli first met. Packouz was a slender young man who sported a yarmulke and wore his white dress shirts untucked. On the other hand, Diveroli was the class clown, a big-mouthed, overweight child who had no fear. The two would spend their free time with their buddies at the beach after school, smoking pot, playing guitar, and sneaking into five-star hotels to swim in their swimming pools. When Packouz graduated, his parents sent him to a school in Israel that specialized in helping children with drug problems, since they were so worried about his excessive marijuana use. Spoiler, it didn't work. Packouz dragged through his final 2 semesters at the University of Florida before returning home. He studied massage, since it looked like a better way to generate money than flipping burgers when he was short on funds. He spent his nights using pot and daydreaming of becoming a pop star with his high school friends. In contrast, Efraim Diveroli was certain about his career choice. He wanted to be an arms dealer like his father and uncle. Diveroli was transferred to Los Angeles to work for his uncle after being expelled from school in the 9th grade. He demonstrated quick learning while working as an apprentice guns dealer, and when he was 16 years old, he was selling firearms across the country. Diveroli returned to Miami at the age of 18 to start his own business, taking over the AEY Incorporated front company his father had created, following a disagreement with his uncle. He had a straightforward yet amazing business strategy. Most businesses expand by luring in more clients, but Diveroli knew that the US military was the only clientele he needed to prosper. Also under the Bush administration, a portion of the arms agreements were guaranteed to tiny enterprises like AEY. Diveroli would submit bids for the contracts without really producing any of the goods, simply acting as a middleman, locating the best offers and outbidding rivals. He understood that in order to participate in the game, he would have to deal with some of the world's shadiest players, including war criminals, soldiers of fortune, corrupt diplomats, and small-time gangsters who keep troops and mercenaries stocked with weapons. After the Cold War ended, the enormous aftermarket for weapons experienced an exponential growth. For the purpose of arming the militias it was establishing in Afghanistan and Iraq, the Pentagon needed access to this new aftermarket. But the issue was that it couldn't enter such a shady underworld by itself. It required businesses like AEY as proxies to carry out its dirty operations, and they did. Now Packouz was aware that Diveroli had turned into a weapons dealer, much like the other teenagers in their marijuana-smoking group. Diveroli enjoyed boasting about how wealthy he was, and among the stoners, tales spread about the enormous sums he was earning were famous, in bitter comparison to their miserable part-time jobs. So naturally, Packouz was eager to join when Diveroli mentioned to him that he's looking for a partner. In November 2005, Packouz started working with Diveroli, receiving a commission-only salary. The duo worked out of a one-bedroom apartment in Miami Beach that Diveroli had rented at the time. They were seated across from one another at a desk in the living room, surrounded by piles of government contracts, and a mound of marijuana. They soon established a regular ritual that included waking up, getting high, and then beginning to haggle. Diveroli handled the sales while Packouz handled the paperwork. As an Orthodox Jewish child, Packouz read the Talmud for 4 hours every day, honing his attention to detail and command of complicated language. Diveroli's brilliance lay in figuring out how to seem serious while applying for government contracts, even if it meant using a baritone voice to appear older. Diveroli took advantage of his best opportunity to win in May 2007, a month during which the war in Afghanistan was reportedly not going very well. AEY managed to secure a $300 million arms deal with the Pentagon by outbidding the closest rival by about $50 million. Diveroli was just about able to legally drink enough champagne, and cocaine was used to celebrate the gun runner's fortunate success. Then they started to work finding the priceless AK-47s. However, the contract's high didn't last very long. After having problems locating the promised products, the young men eventually turned to illegal Chinese supply. AEY experienced supply issues, particularly in Albania, where one of their initial plane loads of ammunition was intercepted on the airstrip of Kyrgyzstan. 80 pallets containing over 5 million rounds for AK-47s used by the Afghan National Army were on board. Because Russian President Vladimir Putin disapproved of NATO's entry into Afghanistan, the plane was grounded. He was grounding them to make sure they paid the $300,000 a day he planned to charge for keeping their plane on the runway. When Packouz received the phone from one of his men in Albania informing him of the emergency, he was outside of a restaurant. And that's how, over a transaction for 5,000 tons of bullets that was scheduled to be transported to Afghanistan, things started to fall apart in Albania. They knew that the ammunition was actually from China, which has been prohibited from supplying the US military since the Tiananmen Square incident in 1989. Their solution was to repackage them, remove all traces of China, and pretend it's all good. In the ensuing months, they illegally supplied 70 aircraft loads of ammunition, each weighing about 45 tons. One of their competitors heard about what they had done and informed the American authorities. Diveroli and Packouz were looked into after the American authorities learned that AEY Incorporated had repackaged worn-out and outdated Chinese ammunition. At the same time, the dynamic duo was falling apart because Packouz hadn't been paid in months, despite millions of dollars coming through the company. If they didn't agree to a settlement, he threatened to contact the IRS and tell them everything. Boys and girls, the lesson to be learned here is to have everything in writing from the get-go to avoid being exploited, and treating your employees goes a long way. Diveroli and Packouz just had a verbal agreement. There was nothing in writing. Packouz sought a meeting with attorneys present in order to defend his interests. The two chatted before the session, in which Packouz agreed to a bargain, giving up a portion of the commission he'd been promised. He believed that he owned something more valuable than money, his skills, which he used to establish his own company as a one-man operation to compete with his former business partner, boasting on his website that his team had conducted business with the Pentagon, the State Department, and the Iraqi and Afghan military. It turned out that Packouz had no idea that bigger issues were on the horizon for him and his ex-best friend. AEY had made significant enemies in the sector after winning the Afghan contract. According to a complaint lodged to the State Department by an American arms dealer, a Chinese-manufactured AK-47 was allegedly purchased by AEY and shipped to the Iraqi army. Although the allegation proved untrue, the Pentagon launched a criminal inquiry as a result. Federal officials conducted a raid at AEY's Miami Beach offices on August 23, 2007, the day Packouz was scheduled to sign the settlement agreement with Diveroli. The agents told everyone to turn off their computers and took all of the company's hard drives and files, in which they were able to find the emails about the Chinese marks on the Albanian ammo, including AEY's idea to repackage it. After being warned that he could spend 350 years in prison for deceiving the authorities since he'd signed documentation claiming that the bullets were from Albania, Packouz cooperated with the investigation and spilled. Their other counterpart, Podritsky, received 10 months of probation, while he received a 14-month probationary period. Diveroli was charged as the main guy in all of this and received 4 years after being found guilty of fraud. Over the course of its brief life, AEY made 85 ammunition deliveries to Afghanistan, totaling more than $66 million, with a further $100 million on the way. The House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform looked into their activities and concluded that it revealed obvious mistakes in military acquisition. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the Inspector General of the Department of Defense were all stunned that this was even allowed to happen and went unnoticed for so long. Where are they now? Well, in addition to being a musician, Packouz has a business that sells electronic drum kits. Naturally, he does this when he's not on his beloved global travels or caring for his kid. His days of smuggling guns are long gone. On the other side, Efraim Diveroli is embracing his background in a distinctive way. He sued the creators of War Dogs for allegedly taking his story without his permission and published a novel about his life called Once a Gun Runner. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.